by the man who will have a proper introduction in a moment, that we did relabel last week's episode incorrectly. I forgot to update it. So my apologies. We did not watch Under Siege twice in a row. That's just torturous for certain people. We actually watched Natural Born Killers, and that was all my fault, just not updating it. This week, we are officially on episode 113, and we are going to be talking about all new stuff. Brand spanking new movies, brand spanking new stuff that is fresh off the presses, ladies and gentlemen. But
oh yeah,
I have done the ramble beforehand. Now let me introduce the true talent of the show, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir? How are you?
Thank you.
Fabulous.
No photos, please. I find it dandy as we move into the end of the semester for those of us studying, and I, unsurprisingly, am completely behind the 8 ball, which is,
isn't that the student way?
It is kind of a student way, but one might have wanted to learn something in the ensuing 20 years, but
No.
Here we are. So I take issue with your talk of everything being fresh and new tonight, considering our chain film this week is 30 years old.
Don't say horrible things like that. It ages me, sir. It ages me.
It is a little bit, because I think I can vaguely remember when it came out, and you're like, oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, it was, I recently reconnected with a friend on Facebook, Zoe. Hello, Zoe. If you ever see or hear this podcast, probably not, because you probably have more important things to do in your life. But it was like, oh, when was the last time we saw? Holy shit, it was 20 years ago. I suddenly aged. I like the bad guy at the end of Raiders the Last Crusade. I just withered visually. It was not a good sign.
I recommended an album to someone this week, actually. It was a UMI record, for those who are curious, the Australian rock band. And I'm like, I fell in love with this record once, very deeply. And then I realized that it was from 2001. It was a 20-year-old record. I'm like, oh. No, yeah, it's a little bit like, it's about as old to people now as the Beatles were to me when I was, a teenager.
Yeah. One of the things of my job is, occasionally you have to do gift cards and things like that, and they have expiration dates, and ours have a 3-year lifespan. I'm having to write the year 2024. And that's just the sci-fi date in a novel or a movie where the world has been decimated, robots are kind of compacting trash. It's not a legitimate date. I'm sorry. It's just weird.
I would normally say, where is my jetpack? But I actually saw some British Royal Marines using jetpacks to fly between ships and stuff the other day. So... Well, I guess they're working on it.
Yeah, the problem with that is somewhere on that jetpack, it does have a little thing saying made in Great Britain, which means it has a very short lifespan.
I would not be so certain they were made in Great Britain. Great Britain make things. They make jet engines in Great Britain.
Well, not really anymore. We make beer.
I am certain Rolls-Royce's factories are still in Great Britain.
Yeah, they're not German at all.
They're in Britain, though. They can't be German, can they?
I think they're owned by a German company now, I think.
I think you're right.
Rolls-Royce isn't, but I don't know.
But you think you're portraying a different standard. No one in Australia has owned anything for a very long time. So, I mean,
that's the Western way.
Cars in Geelong were made by Ford, and we consider them Australian-made because they were made here. Whether or not the company who owned them is from another country or not, we can't get too picky about that.
Now, that is more than enough bullshit and chitter-chatter for the start of the show. I have not introduced the furry talent. Archimedes, how are you, my man? I'm hungry. Give me food. Your fingers smell like chicken. I want them. Good boy. We are going to get on with the show, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, we are going to start the show with our chain movie. And this was my pick this week. We are going on from last week's Natural Born Killers with Woody Harrelson to an uncredited role, even though he has a couple of lines.
Yeah. The
Steve Martin, I'm going to call it classic because it is, quite fairly positively remembered. As Travis did comment last week, it was one of the last movies that he made before a bit of a slump. This is L.A. Story.
I would take issue with calling it a classic. I don't think it's in that category. But just to start with something interesting, you were talking about the fact that Woody goes in for an uncredited role here. There are a lot of uncredited roles here, and there's some pretty big names. Rick Moranis has an entire scene as a gravedigger, which he's uncredited for. You have Chevy Chase, who is still very famous in the early 90s.
Yeah, he was.
In an uncredited role. Paula Abdul, John Lithgow, and Robert Picardo, who probably wasn't that famous back then, but went on to become famous. And a little guy named Terry fucking Jones in an uncredited role, voice role. And you're like, this is a ridiculous amount of talent. Any film would be quite glad to have all of that, but to not even credit them is quite insane.
It's a weird one, I guess, because the nature of LA Story is it's kind of a satirical dissection of life in LA from a very sardonic point of view. But at the same time, it's also kind of a love letter to LA in the same way, sort of like New York, I Love You, Paris, I Love You, those kinds of movies. They have that's become their own kind of genre of sort of like, we're going to pick a city and do little short stories about them, just how much we love them and just life in these cities and things like that. There's a little kind of nugget of that in this movie, but it is definitely more of your typical narrative kind of fare. So
I think we should give him a synopsis because we always forget the synopsis.
I will do it. It's my movie. I'll read it.
Yes. You do.
So, with the help of a talking freeway billboard, a wacky weatherman tries to win the heart of an English newspaper reporter who's struggling to make sense of the strange world in early 1990s LA. That's pretty accurate as to what this movie is, and it sums it up pretty tightly compared to some of the other.
Well, what was the other one for Minari last week? A family start a farm in Arkansas.
Yeah. It's like, okay.
Well, you're really reading my appetite there, IMDb.
Full of details.
Yeah, and I think you combine that synopsis from IMDb with what you just said about it. I think does give you a pretty good idea. As you sort of said, it is very much a piss take on LA life in the late 80s, early 90s. I don't know, but I got the love story angle. I don't think it's as... I don't particularly love the New York, I Love You, Paris, I Love You film. I think it's kind of a circle jerk. Aren't we big and rich and famous and we can afford to hang out in cool places like Paris and New York? Yay!
I just kind of want someone to do one of those as a parody thing, is like I Love Geelong.
There are so many reasons to love Geelong.
Yes, absolutely.
Geelong, I love you, and we can just go drive around in moccasins and go to a football or something. They've got the National Wool Museum. I was there.
I love you, Melbourne. I know what your addition would be. It would be the floral clock.
The floral clock, and of course the big wheel where you can go on top and look over Melbourne's chemical hinterland.
We are selling the city we live in.
I would like to note that I was at the official opening of the National Wool Museum of Geelong in 1988.
Did you have a choice in that?
I did not have a choice in that. But Her Majesty was there on the opening day, and she almost looked at us.
Almost. See, you can never actually tell because she's been replaced, and it's kind of like when you go into one of those old homes and they've got the portrait painting, the eyes follow you. That's basically just what happens with her. You kind of feel like, I think she might have looked at me, but she's not moving right now. She's been pickled in gin. It's fine.
And that's just we got a bit of a treat coming up for you a little later on from 1988 people, so stay tuned for that one. That's a teaser. It's a teaser.
So,
but LA Story
on track. Yes,
LA Story. I would not classify this as a classic. because I find it infuriatingly inconsistent. And its highs I enjoy, but I don't think they are anywhere near his best work. Being things like The Jerk or Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, just to name a couple. It's maybe a different brand. You sort of said earlier, it's a sardonic take. Where he was maybe a little bit more slapsticky in some of his other bigger roles, and with Jerk and stuff were a little bit more physical comedy. Jerry Lewis-ish. Where this one's a little bit more dry, tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time, kind of sketchy in parts. It's almost like there were comedy sketches throughout the film, and the film will wildly veer between being a straight-ahead romantic comedy with some wacky characters. So romantic comedies can go either way. This one would be a romantic comedy leaning on the comedy side.
Yeah.
But it would go from a straight-ahead romantic comedy into a wacky sketch.
Yeah.
Like that. In a moment's notice, you'll swing from normal timeline to sometimes very successful comic sketches. Like I think one of my favorites is when they line up to get money from the ATM, and there's a lineup of muggers on the other side of the ATM, and they get their money.
I'll be your mugger today.
Hi, I'm Bob. I'll be your mugger tonight, or your robber tonight, and that kind of thing. So those sort of gags sometimes work, but then there's the gag at the start where we're driving down the freeway, and he's like, "Oh my god, it's spring," and where's my gun? And I'm like, I guess there's some sort of commentary about LA traffic here.
Yeah, in some regards, the way that it just so violently swings, like that particular scenario, it almost kind of feels a bit Monty Python.
A little bit, you can see that, but Python never went straight ahead as hard.
Yeah, and it's a weirdly paced movie, but I think that's kind of intentional and I think that this is a really, really articulate, overly intelligent look at life in LA, and it's basically one big inside joke for anyone who lives and works in LA. And I feel like anyone who has visited will get a little bit of it. But anyone who has not really experienced LA is just going to be, okay, I think that's supposed to be funny. I kind of get that. Like they're all sitting at this lovely restaurant and they're all talking, and like they're all kind of rating everything, and then the earthquake starts. And so like, oh, what do you reckon that is? And they just start rating it, and the conversation just keeps going. It's like, okay, LA's on a fault line. All right, I get the purpose of the joke, and they've been so desensitized to it. And again, that theme of being desensitized from these otherwise highly unusual scenarios is just commonplace in LA. Earthquakes, being mugged, violence on the roadways, that sort of stuff. Is like, okay, this all seems to be inside jokes on LA.
I picked that up. I mean, even if I think you get a lot of jokes, even if you haven't been to LA, simply because of the reputation the city has of being, full of rich people, the idle rich, which as that awful Stephen Fry film we watched a few weeks ago might have described them as. I mean, one of the scenes I enjoyed most is in that same restaurant scene. Though, again, I was in LA once, and there was a bit of an earthquake. No, it was in San Francisco, sorry, not LA. And there was a bit of an earthquake, and Patria, a friend of the show, Patria and I, kind of had a look at each other and gone, did we get vibrating beds by mistake in here? Like, oh, no, it's like, I've never seen one of those, by the way, but apparently they exist.
I've stayed in a place with one. It's weird.
But it was an earthquake, and a little tremor. Yeah. And we were talking about Uber driver about it the next day. And we're like, oh, was there a tremor last night? He's like, I didn't notice. He's like, I could. Like it was a 4 or something on the Richter. Oh, 4. Well, I wouldn't.
No, I don't get out of bed for a 4.
I don't get out of the chair, but for less than a 5, and so that's definitely accurate. But the scene in the restaurant where it's like, I'll have a decaf, I'll have a decaf, double decaf cappuccino. Do you have decaffeinated coffee, ice cream? I'll have a double decaf with a twist of lemon. I'll have a twist of lemon. I'll have a twist of lemon.
It's almost like a weird narrative telephone kind of thing. It just ends up changing, and they're just like, oh yeah, I'll have the idea of lemon juice, thank you.
and I do very much enjoy. I'll give kudos in that scene where I love how that scene's shot. That camera swirling around the table, like in that really kinetic way. Like, I mean, it's a beautifully shot scene, and I know it's weird to say that about a 30-year-old comedy film, but I just love how that shot is just sort of. It's really nicely done. I don't think the rest of the film is particularly interestingly shot. Just that scene stood out to me.
Yeah, this is. I don't really feel like there's any particular director panache on this movie in any way, shape, or form. This is a character movie and a weird parody variation of LA as a character movie. It's not about oh yes, this is a Chris Nolan movie and you're going to expect this or that. This is not a Quentin Tarantino movie. The director
is Mick Jackson, who's not someone who's got a lot of. We're talking The Bodyguard, Volcano. That kind of thing.
And fair cop. I mean, I just had a quick look through his IMDb, and he's not really delved too much in comedy. He's done a lot of TV. He's done a couple of things with kind of comedy elements to them. But, when you're getting into a movie in the early 1990s with Steve Martin, it's like, okay, that's going to be a different kind of thing.
It's a very interesting choice because I believe he is British. Yes, because he did direct a film in the mid-'80s, which I think was banned in Britain called Threads. Have you ever come across Threads?
I've heard of it.
It was a TV movie about what might happen in the event of a nuclear war in Great Britain. Now, do not quote me on this, but I think for a long time, part of it was either banned or part of it was banned.
Oh, yeah.
But don't quote me on that. I could be thinking of something else. But it is a very effective little film about how horrible, if we didn't already know, how horrible nuclear war would be. But I did not realize that Mick Jackson directed it because I've actually watched it a couple of times. I think it's on YouTube if you're interested. But you look at that and you go, okay, he made a almost documentary-esque, horrific, story about the disaster film, really, about a nuclear attack. And he did some TV after that. He did a movie called Chattahoochee, which I've never heard of. And then he lands one of the biggest stars in the world in a sardonic, Python-esque comedy about Los Angeles. And you're like, okay. That's an interesting choice.
It's a weird choice.
You kind of wonder how he ended up there. Like maybe did he meet Steve Martin, or did Martin just really like Threads or something?
Maybe. The next year he directs The Bodyguard, which was one of the biggest movies of the year and
of the decade.
Has a lasting legacy. Yeah.
And again, that's very different. Again, I mean, obviously, I don't recall, or maybe I don't know if this film did particularly well, LA Story, but it's certainly not as fondly remembered as a lot of Martin's other work.
No, it's definitely an outlier for Steve Martin. People would generally go to like what you referred to before, so like the Dirty Rotten Scoundrels and Jerk certainly being his big ones. There's Small Community that people who love Roxanne, and his cameo in Little Shop of Horrors is fucking amazing. And then there's even people who really like his Father of the Bride movies. They were
very successful.
Yeah, they were very successful. So it's just a weird mash of stuff happening. So there's a lot to love.
Film grossed $28 million in the US. To give context, that would put it in 49th place that year, the 49th biggest gross in the US. Does not have a figure for international box office. So Very US-centric film, so maybe we feel like it didn't do so well, but that's not overly successful. That's less than Madonna Truth or Dare.
Yeah.
It's less than Double Impact, less than King Ralph.
King Ralph had a moment.
So it's. I would have to say that this is potentially an unsuccessful film at the box office in that sense.
Yeah, but this was the first time that I've ever watched this, and I actually really enjoyed it. I really liked the dissection of society that was going on here, and it was fun. Steve Martin can be a wickedly smart writer, and he has in the past, and not as frequently in his more recent stuff, but he has been able to really kind of laser in on certain elements and just pull out some great comedy and use comedy as a weapon to dissect some bits. I've just really enjoyed the way that he did that. I loved Richard E. Grant in this as well. I thought that he was, especially for where Richard was in his career at that point, like 1991. Let's quickly go back. He's only been working a lot.
Withnail and I would have been late 80s, wouldn't it? 87.
Yeah.
So 4 years after Withnail and I.
Yeah, this was the same year as another movie that we'd done in our chain movies of Hudson Hawk.
That's not.
He was in 1989. He was in Warlock, which is an underrated old school classic. He had done How to Get Ahead in Advertising, which is fucking fantastic. Anyone who hasn't seen it should check it out because it is fucking weird. Withnail and I was 1987. So this was really his first kind of true big brand movie in Hollywood, I guess, because Steve Martin was a legitimate star, and him being put in that, and then the same year also being in a movie with Bruce Willis,
which was predicted, of course, where it didn't turn out that way, but it was predicted to be a big hit, right? Like it was. They didn't sink all that money in it for nothing.
Yeah. I mean,
of course,
we both talked fondly about it.
I think people missed the point. I think it was just weird that they spent all that money on something that looked like that. Yeah. And of course, the next year he was in Bram Stoker's Dracula and In the Age of Innocence, and he was often to the races. And I love Richard E. Grant. I also call out that Sarah Jessica Parker was surprisingly effective in this film.
Yeah.
The IMDb trivia says she has stated this movie changed her career. Up until this point, she'd always played mousy girls with her best friend. She said that no one in Hollywood thought of her as sexy. Once she was cast in this role, several new doors opened for her. And I mean, she kind of has a reputation now. I mean, she's kind of best known for obviously Sex and the City,
Carrie,
which has kind of become her character, right? I don't think she does anything else now except for you probably live off that forever if you really wanted to. But before this, she was in. I watched one of her movies on my other podcast, The Throwback, available now on Spotify. But we watched Girls Just Want to Have Fun from 1985, starring Sarah Jessica Parker, which wasn't as bad as you might have thought it was. But she was in Flight of a Navigator as well. But
she was.
But that was again not really that kind of role. But probably by 91, she probably wanted to start stepping into those sort of more mature roles. And not that she did anything particularly big after this. I mean, she did Honeymoon in Vegas, Hocus Pocus, Striking Distance, Ed Wood, which I think we reviewed earlier in the earlier in the chain. A couple of
weeks ago. Yeah,
I heard it a couple of weeks. It was last year, I think.
I don't know, but yeah.
We did Ed Wood, but but she's actually really funny in this. Like, she can do comedy. Like, she plays the character of Sandy. And just having her spell her name was absolutely brilliant. It was like, big S, low A, little N, big D, little E, big E, whatever it is. And you're like, okay. He's like, I don't think we should make love. Okay, fine. We'll just have sex.
Yeah. And the fact that she's always moving.
Yeah.
Always moving. She really captures the a young person just living life in LA so perfectly, and it's like, okay, this is great. And I feel like she just gave the right amount of constant physical energy and movement to kind of put Steve Martin permanently on edge, because we talked about it before. He's been, up until this point, really, he was a very physical actor and very physical comedian, and he's starting to get a little older here. He's starting to, like, he's showing a bit more age, and then seeing this young perky constantly just like arms and spinning and just doing everything all the time. It's like, this is really, really cleverly done. I really enjoy this. This is great.
Interesting because she takes up a physical comedy, really, doesn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, you can see why she went on to be a big star, because she is watchable.
Oh yeah.
In addition to being kind of sexy in a 90s kind of way.
Yeah.
Some of it, and just to echo you, Richard D. Grant, fucking brilliant. Love everything he does. I think I mentioned it last week. My favorite scene in the entire film is the painting interpretation scene at the gallery.
So good.
It's like I can just see the curve of a breast. Yeah. When I see a painting like this, it makes me emotionally erect. And it's just a big blancmange of like red smudge on this. Like, look at the people behind, keep peeking from behind the door, like they've never seen anything like this.
It's so wonderful. It's really, really fantastic.
That scene in particular, I enjoy. There are some. Oh, so one other highlight before I get a little bit negative on this.
Yeah.
How good is Patrick Stewart as the
Oh my god, that whole scenario of having to go to the
You
bank.
can have the chicken.
Yes, it's so good.
So
it
just to be clear,
so good.
Steve Martin is trying to impress Sarah Jessica Parker. His character, take her out for dinner to an expensive restaurant. Sort of think Dorcia, from American Psycho. And it's Le Idiot is the name of a restaurant. And he tries to make a reservation. And they laugh at him when he tries to make a reservation for Friday. When he suddenly says Sunday or something, he actually has to have a meeting with the chef and the maitre d' at the bank with their bank manager to prove he can afford it. He can afford to actually eat there, and they're actually vetting his dinner choice. What would you like to order? I think I would order a duck. You can have a chicken.
What if the girl I'm with wants to order something else? You suggest the duck. You suggest the chicken.
It's like you can. It's that whole scene again. That's one of those weird sketches we were talking about, where it's a fairly normal scene. He's calling it a restaurant. The gag is that he can't get any reservation on a Friday. He's not as famous as he thinks he is. That's kind of funny. But then it takes this sideways step into, this scene with him having a meeting at the bank with the maitre d' and the chef, and that's one of the scenes that's the little sketches that is very funny. Yeah. But it's a grating, screeching left turn from what it normally does. But it works beautifully on this occasion. So I'll pay it. And Patrick Stewart as a snooty waiter just goes to show we haven't seen him do a lot of comedy.
Not much, no. I mean, kind of this little kind of cameo that he does here, it's kind of the biggest comedy thing that I instantly think of him doing that isn't his episode where he's in Ricky Gervais Extras.
Which is the funniest thing you've ever seen. Like, of course, the closest fall up, of course.
And I've seen
everything. Honestly, if you have not seen Patrick Stewart, just go to YouTube, Patrick Stewart Extras. Enjoy. You can thank us later. Even if you don't like Ricky Gervais, because I'm pretty sure you don't like Ricky Gervais very much.
Not a fan.
But Ricky's just really sitting there trying not to laugh.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the bloopers where Ricky can't help but laugh is actually probably every bit as funny as the actual sketch in the end. But one of the weak points of this film for me is very much Victoria Tennant's role as Sarah, the love interest of Steve Martin's Harris. They were married at the time, which is interesting. I did not know that. Okay. But she is a complete wet blanket of a character. Like, The only funny thing about her is she consistently drives on the left-hand side of a road, which doesn't look very funny to us because that's, of course, the correct side of a road to drive on.
But everywhere else in the world, that is
wrong. Correct. Everywhere else in the world is incorrect and drives on the wrong side of the road. But that's just fun. I found her. She's not sexy. She's not very funny. She's not very cool. I don't know. I just found her kind of like a really meh wet blanket of a character, and I just never really fully understood why Steve Martin was so in love with her.
I kind of feel like she epitomized what I imagine. I'm pretty sure this came out before it, but like Hugh Grant's character from 4 Weddings and a Funeral, but gender bent, and then instead of being in England, being in America in this weird location. That's kind of the vibe that I got from her.
That's a good description. I can see that, but that doesn't work in this film.
It doesn't work in the film, no. And there's not enough of her to really bring it in. Like the fact that, you know, when he's in the car with her and she's on the wrong side of the road and he's like, get on the right. And she just says, I don't think he can hear you, and keeps driving on the wrong side of the road. That's great. And the fact that when he goes to pick her up, you hear her playing the instrument, and then she doesn't finish. It's one of those famous little ditties, and she doesn't finish the last 2 notes, and she just has, oh, 1 second, I've just got to powder my nose, and then you just hear pop pop, and then it comes back. It's like, that's funny. Show me a bit more of that. It feels like there's a little bit too much time spent on Steve Martin's character and not quite enough on her to warrant this romance story that's supposed to be the center of the story.
I needed to believe it more. Like, it's completely left center. But what another film from 1991? I'm thinking of Wayne's World, and I'm thinking of Tia Carrere's character in that film, and the way that they shot and they portrayed Cassandra, that's her character's name in that film. Yeah. And like, you know exactly why Wayne's obsessed with her. Obviously in that kind of world, she is super hot, sexy woman who plays in a heavy metal band. And I'm like, you know, it is and a badass
whose pulse would not be racing for that.
And like, and that is exactly the kind of woman that Wayne would be. I mean, obviously we're talking a ridiculous comedy film here, but that character Wayne would be interested in a sexy heavy metal singer who can kung fu fight, right? Like, I mean, it makes sense. Like, it just works. So, and I'm not saying like a Cassandra style character would work here, because that would make no sense in the setting of a film. But those 2 characters, you go, I never questioned why Wayne would be interested in Cassandra, but this one you go, she's kind of blank and not. Yeah, I don't buy the romance. I don't understand what he sees in her, and so that's a flat spot for me. And considering that film kind of revolves around that relationship and the forbidden nature of it, and the same thing, like Richard E. Grant's obsessed with getting back together with her as playing her ex-husband in this film. You're like, again, I'm like, I don't really get it.
I can kind of see it a little bit, because particularly at this point in time, everyone was, particularly the British, and it was in a lot of media, Charles and Diana, and how the difficulties, and they keep working through it. They've separated, but they're still doing things together. They're still co-parenting the princes and all of that shit. That kind of mania does sort of feed into their relationship, particularly Richard, where he's kind of going, oh yes, but divorce isn't kind of the end of the relationship in England. Like something along those lines. It's like, I get that as a British person, but that's a very, very narrow cut on a very unusual slice of meat.
The other weird thing about this film, and this is, I'm going to cut, not necessarily going to chuck this in the negative category, just okay, that's a bit odd, is the severe makes it sound bad, the very strong Shakespearean influence on this film. Shakespeare is littered throughout the film. References, quotes, the scene of Rick Moranis as the gravedigger as I understand it, is lifted completely from Hamlet.
Yeah.
And various of
Shakespeare's grave.
Shakespeare grave, because why is that in LA? I don't know.
But it's
full
the
of
same
sound
reason. Like, why the hell is there an Elvis grave at the Melbourne grave?
It's a memorial. It's not the same thing.
it's that thing of like LA is young. It's a young city, and it's just like one of those things that's like, oh yeah, we need to kind of bring in like third-party history to give ourselves modern-day relevance.
I'm pretty sure there isn't a grave to Shakespeare there, but there was just a quote now. It was like, it's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And there's the one point where Talking Billboards has a quote that says, there are greater things in heaven and earth than you can imagine. I don't forget the exact quote.
That's right. Yeah. Who's that? What's his name? Fitzgerald. I can't remember. It's not Shakespeare, but yeah, it's one of the other famous writers.
My Shakespeare.
There's only like 6 famous writers.
No, it is Shakespeare. It is Shakespeare. It's from Hamlet. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than dreamt of in your philosophy.
Yes, that's right.
That's the quote I'm referencing. I'm pretty sure it was on the billboard. It may not have been exactly that, but it was paraphrasing that. So I am not conversant enough in Shakespeare, and my Shakespeare-loving friends who might be listening, you know who you are, will be sitting there going and marking me down in like the East German judge who's giving me a 4.5 for not. But I bet there's more stuff in here. There's more references in here than I'm missing.
Yeah. So it's a quote from Hamlet. Apparently, there's more things in heaven and earth, Harry, than are dreamt of. Your philosophy.
Yeah. As I said, it doesn't really. I mean, unless I would love someone to tell me I'm wrong, but the underlying story is based on maybe Midnight's Dream or something like that. A little bit like, say, 10 Things I Hate About You was based on Taming the Shrew.
Yeah.
And Clueless was very loosely based on Emma, which is a Jane Austen novel. I know, not Shakespeare, but, classic literature. But maybe this is based on some Shakespeare play. I don't know. I haven't put the pieces together. But they just didn't seem to fit. I didn't quite sure why they were there. And they really stood out to me because, I know that that's a Shakespeare quote, and I don't know much about Shakespeare. I knew the Hamlet thing was a gravedigger, and I'm like, why are you doing this?
It very much speaks to the big problem of this whole movie, which is it's a Frankenstein's monster of a movie where just bits is put in, and when you look at them isolated, it's like, yeah, that's cool. But then when you kind of step back and look at the whole thing, it's like, I'm feeling a lot of everything at the moment because I've just gone from Monty Python to clever parody to Shakespeare to kind of lackadaisical rom-com to what I don't know where this is supposed to be taking me. And even the end, after everything that happens and the movie finishes, you kind of feel like, okay. And
that didn't really resolve anything, did it?
Yeah, they got together, but it's kind of really the start of their relationship, and it's like, okay, you're leaving just as things are gonna get interesting. Fair enough. That's your choice. Okay.
It's kind of like we're gonna throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And if you need to be exceedingly good to pull that off. I think it's fair to say that that's kind of go back to Monty Python again. Like if you look at Life of Brian or the better films that they made, they're throwing everything at the screen. You can't say that they're not. The thing is that you can get away with it when you throw everything at the screen and still 90-95% of your gags land.
That's actually it's kind of like watching The Meaning of Life. Monty Python's Meaning of Life. It's basically a sketch show. That movie is like, okay, there's bits here, but there's no fluid story.
The fluid story is weak, isn't it?
Yeah, And
compared to The Life of Brian or Holy Grail.
Holy Grail, yeah. So coming off of those two and then doing that, it's like, okay, that's not what I was expecting from these guys, and this is not what you kind of been groomed to expect from a Steve Martin film, and not what you're groomed to expect from a comedy in the late 80s, early 90s either. They were a lot more
broad.
Yeah. And
you know what film it kind of reminds me of now when I think of it?
Is
The Cable Guy. If you think about it, like people walk in and paid their money for The Cable Guy. What do we expect? We expected a Jim Carrey movie. We did not get a Jim Carrey movie.
No.
It was kind of a comedy, but it was kind of a few other things. Dark comedy. It was like a scare, like not exactly the same genres or anything, but in a sense, it was a film that very much subverted your expectations.
Yeah.
But probably not in a way that people wanted to subvert it.
Yeah. It's a very, very brave and very intelligent production company that pulls off subversion of expectations. So often people, especially in the modern day where we look at, like we have said it ad nauseum, that Marvel make very, very boring, safe trailers, and they are not trying to subvert expectations or anything like that. And you get into the movie and you know exactly what you're getting in for. That's exactly the safe barrier. You don't suddenly get this weird trailer that just kind of goes off in this unusual thing. It's like, from the same studio that bought you Ang Lee's Hulk. there's no weird kind of, we're going to deviate off this way just so that we can fucking confuse everyone when they actually get through the door. It's a weird environment, and it so rarely happens that someone goes in and goes, oh, a more recent example of this is the awesome movie Colossus with Anne Hathaway. That's the trailer for that. It's like, okay, this is kind of a comedy, and then you watch it and it's like, oh no, there's funny elements to it, but this is not a comedy.
Speaking again, it's a very dark film.
Yeah, and that was done very well, but it did not do particularly well at the box office because people were not expecting what they thought when they go into it. Similarly with Donnie Darko, one of my favorite ones to reference, is like the trailer for that movie. It sold like a fucking slasher movie. It's like, no, maybe you could have sold this as a weird superhero movie. But even then, that's not what Donnie Darko is. It's a very, very brave move to do, and there's very, very few opportunities of success.
I don't know that this was actually intentional. I just think this is what they wanted to do, and it turned out to be this weird blancmange of a film, which I'm not saying I didn't enjoy. It's certainly not unpleasant to spend a couple of hours with LA Story. It's I'd seen it before. So I knew what to expect. So I'm actually a little bit jealous of you because you got to enjoy the painting scene and so many of these other sketches. I'm Bob, I'll be your Robert tonight. Gags for the first time, and I think they're very funny. But it's a weird one though. It's a funny little film to try and get your head around. Is it a comedy? Is it drama? Comedy, drama, fantasy is what IMDb says. You go, yeah, okay, it's a really weird mix.
That's a fair way of describing it, I guess. And I'm just looking at the runtime of it, hour 35. I think that's I think I enjoy this movie overall more than you do. Not saying that you don't enjoy it, but I think that it just kind of vibes with me more. And I feel like that was pretty quick. It's 95 minutes.
But it's certainly, I will pay this. A lot of filmmakers, and you've heard me correct, I've gone on about this ad nauseum. Again, filmmakers today, they don't know when to stop. And they don't have anyone telling them to stop. And they'll let a film like this, maybe this runs an hour 15 minutes these days, right? And that extra 15 minutes just makes it way too long. I think a good comedy, get in, get out, make people laugh. If you can. It was a fine, and maybe also I'm a little more critical of it because I have seen it a number of times, and the charm of those gags don't have the same effect on me as they did the first time I saw it.
Yeah. Well, now
we're weary and curmudgeonly as ever. Thank you very much.
Now tell me, Travis, you told me before the show when I asked, do you know what you're going to do? And you said, get a picture of Steve Martin. And then you gave the little hint of the 80s. So
It's
tell
not
me.
80s. I said it's going to be difficult.
Okay.
So I am going to follow our friend, Mr. Steve Martin here. I was very tempted while you were talking there. I have managed to locate and identify a link between LA Story and Cable Guy, but we are not going to go there.
Okay.
I asked for suggestions from friends of mine about which film to go with, and there were two contenders. One of the contenders was Sex and the City, the movie.
No, don't do that to me, you motherfucker.
I would have been doing it to myself. We are not. It was very, very, very tempting because I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that film, but we are not going to be watching Sex and the City. We are going to be watching it. We're going way left field here. We're going to be watching from 1997 the David Mamet drama thriller, The Spanish Prisoner, starring Steve Martin.
Oh, okay.
I have never heard of this film before. I did some
Neither
research.
have I.
It has a 7.2 on IMDb and a Metacritic score of 70. An employee of a corporation with this lucrative secret process is tempted to betray it, but there's more to it than that. It is written and directed by the great David Mamet, well-known screenplay and playwright and screenwriter. Probably best known for writing, I think it was Glenn Ross.
Yeah.
And I think if you have a look, you probably have found it now. I think David Mamet's an exit for you. You can find lots of things he's been involved in. And while there are no other big stars in the film other than Steve, there's Felicity Huffman, who's done a fair bit of stuff, I think, around the world,
as well as time in prison.
She was actually part of that admission scandal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But there's also some fairly well-known character actors in this film who've been
Ricky Jay.
Who've been in Ricky Jay. You won't know his name. You look at his face, you go, "Oh, I've seen him in hundreds of different things."
Yeah.
He's done lots and lots of different stuff. So I think you'll be able to find your way. This will not be Death Machine level of or Exit,
Clark Gregg. We could even go to Marvel with Clark Gregg. Goodness me.
But this film, I have managed to locate a special access to the film. For
special privileges, of course.
Special privilege access.
We are high profile.
High profile, and for some reason you've never heard of it. I've never heard of it. No one's ever heard of it. It's not available to stream in Australia, so we've had to arrange special access.
There we go.
I didn't think you could buy it in Australia.
No, I don't think so. Ooh, I've seen it too many times to make it a movie to watch. But he did write Wag the Dog.
I love Wag the Dog.
That's
we've reviewed it on the show before.
I feel like we've done it before, but I may just have to go and rewatch that anyway because it's
such a great film.
Yeah,
if you haven't seen it, and then we'll be right back around to Woody Harrelson again. But I was also thinking, did we follow Sarah Jessica Parker before? I think we might have followed her in or out of Ed Wood at some point in time. We really should have been writing these down, ladies and gentlemen.
I have been. Look, I have notes.
I know we're doing them now, but we didn't do it from the start.
No, I can actually give you a full list of all of them. Look at that. There's a whole page of writing there.
That's actually really. I'm glad you did, because I'm going to suggest one of our listeners do it because I can't be asked.
Although some of my notes are like episode 76, Highlander Poo.
Touche. I mean, that really, says it all. That's what it should have been called. So that's next week, The Spanish Prisoner. G and I will be we have our special access. If you have a copy at home on VHS potentially, feel free to watch along and give us your thoughts. If you've seen it and you've got something to say about it, do feel free to chip in and let us know what to expect. No spoilers though. Now, but before we move on to our next segment, I don't know what you think, but I think it might be time to give our adoring masses, and apologies for people who are listening to the podcast version. It may not be quite as much fun. So it's an excellent reason to just jump on board and watch the live stream.
Go to twitch.tv/thefriedbrain, ladies and gentlemen. Watch. You can jump into the comments. You can actually interact with us. We are live, so we do talk to you.
And if you can't do it live, you can always go back and watch them. They're recorded. They're there for posterity, so you don't have to. If you don't go, I can't. If you're a Russian bot somewhere and you can't stay up till 2:30 in the morning because you're busy hacking election voting machines in Florida or something, you can always come back and watch this later. And we make excellent vote machine hacking accompaniment. Just have some in the background while you're hacking the US election.
It's really, if you're going to bring down democracy, we are guys to just listen to in the background.
Exactly. When society collapses, you think of us.
We will be the background noise.
So I don't know if you can do this or do I have to do the thing. We are going to, and you can do some things over there, I think, to put this on the big screen, because we are going to have a word from our sponsors.
Yes.
And our sponsors this week, yes, I know what you're thinking. We have sponsors. Well, I call them sponsors. Our sponsors are the evening television from Channel 9, April 11th, 1988. So enjoy, ladies and gentlemen.
We are back. There was no audio, so I just did audio commentary on those ones.
Oh, there you go. Maybe next time. This is the first time we've tried it. Next time
This is the first time we're doing it.
We'll try it. We'll try it with like maybe I'll put not mute me, and I can actually have the audio come through. So, thank you everyone who stuck around and listened to those words from our sponsors.
It was kind of like Cinema Nova does adverts.
It's like, I say Challenge Bank and Copyright. And I did like there was actually a promo for Sudden Impact in there as well. The Clint Eastwood film.
I appreciated that, and it definitely made me appreciate high definition TV.
Yeah, well.
This is 4 a.m. eyes.
It didn't seem that bad at the time.
No, it didn't. Hindsight is 2020. Unfortunately, television wasn't. Now, where are we going to go to next? Do you want to talk about Judas and the Black Messiah, or shall I talk about The Woman in the Window?
Yes, I can talk about Judas and the Black Messiah. I think this will be a fairly briefish commentary in the film for me because, well, I mean, as the title sort of, indicates, this is a
rom-com,
a fun, rollicking family biblical film about Judas's adventure with his pet dragon, Messiah.
Oh my God, I actually want to watch that movie.
It's just like The Flight of the Dragons, but less anti-Semitic.
That would be a really weird thing if this was.
I'm going
Semitic?
go straight to hell for that one. Judas and the Black Messiah from 2021 offered a plea deal by the FBI. William O'Neill infiltrates the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party to gather intelligence on Chairman Fred Hampton. This film won a couple of Academy Awards recently for what it matters. I know a lot of people are doing their best these days to downplay the value of Oscars, but I'm tell it to Daniel Kaluuya, who won for Best Supporting Actor, who I think is arguably one of the biggest rising stars in filmmaking today. I mean, he's done a lot of great work.
Yeah, he has been a consistent, reliable talent since his emergence, really. And, I am really excited to see where he goes next. And I'm looking forward to Judas and the Black Messiah. This looks interesting. So tell me.
And I mean, I feel the good thing about Daniel Kaluuya for me is the first time I ever saw him in anything was in Black Mirror, 15 Million Merits. And I feel a sense of investment in his career now. He's like, I feel like he's one of our Black Mirror alumni who's gone on to make it, and so many have now. Like
Daniel Kaluuya, you may be getting a call from Travis the Talent asking for royalties later on.
I mean, pumping your tires. Where do you want to listen to me? But it also won for best achievement in music written for motion. It won best original song as well for its Oscar. This, for those who aren't familiar, hopefully everybody knows who the Black Panther Party was. If you are completely unfamiliar with U.S. history, our friends, the Russian bots, might want to study up a little bit because it could help in rigging future elections. But basically, the Black Panther Party were a sort of a militant political group that arose in the United States in the 60s. Amongst mainly obviously the African American community as sort of a political resistance movement to the racism that they continue to endure today, even through to today. And I guess what made them a little bit different to what had come before in terms of the Martin Luther Kings of the world, who stood for sort of religious based non-violence. Approaches to changes to civil rights. These guys had no problem with violence. These guys had no problems with carrying guns, and their philosophy was more based in things like Marxism or socialism than Christianity, like the sort of the other probably better known sectors of the civil rights community were. Fred Hampton was a young and highly charismatic and respected chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. And it is documented fact that the FBI saw them as a significant threat to the United States, being they were generally kind of leftist, which meant they were commies, and also they were black, which meant, black people bad, race, the overwhelming racism that continued at the time.
Yeah.
So they were targeted and, generally speaking, murdered. So spoiler alert there. But this film is, as it sort of indicates there, think of a film like The Departed. It's a very similar kind of style of film here, where we had Leo DiCaprio, who was a policeman pretending to be a criminal to catch a policeman. Where we had Mark Wahlberg, who was a policeman who was actually a criminal.
No, you're thinking of Matt Damon. Mark Wahlberg was the cop who was just an arsehole cop, but still was a cop.
I stand corrected. It's been a while since I've seen it. That style of sort of story here. So or Gangs of New York was another one who came to mind here. Where was it Leo DiCaprio again in that film was like he was planning to kill Bill the Butcher because Bill the Butcher killed his dad.
Yeah,
but he did that by infiltrating Bill the Butcher's inner sanctum and then becoming his most trusted advisor, and then that almost fatherly relationship between the two of them. Spoilers if you haven't seen Gangs of New York. But that's, in a way, that's maybe a more accurate sort of comparison here. So we have the character of Bill O'Neill, who is a small-time crook who is recruited by the FBI to infiltrate the Black Panthers and report back intelligence, particularly on Fred Hampton's activities, to the FBI in an effort to undermine him and potentially have him arrested and such, and have him removed from power. The FBI is played really, really well. The main FBI detective or agent who has contact with Bill O'Neill is played by Jesse Plemons, better known by some as Meth Damon.
Another Black Mirror man.
For me, though, he always goes back to Breaking Bad for me, for Jesse Plemons. But you're right, he was, of course, in the USS Callister again. So many great actors turn up on that show.
Fanboy hat on, please, Travis.
I fucking love that show, and he was great in that episode. But he just gets off on playing assholes. Like
he's very good at playing twisted fucks.
He just basically plays strictly assholes, and like he played a Nazi in Breaking Bad. He was like a pervert, freaking rapist almost on freaking Evil Bastard in Black Mirror.
Yeah.
He played a very weird sort of ex-boyfriend, and I'm thinking of ending things. It was,
I don't know if I would be able to actually take him seriously in a kind of hero role. Maybe it's partly the fact that he does just look so much like a kind of Universe B Matt Damon clone. It's like, oh no, he's clearly, he just shaved off the evil moustache to blend in and disappear. Maybe it's that, but I don't know.
He's going to be in the Jungle Cruise movie with The Rock and Emily Blunt.
He's going to be that bad guy. Come on.
I hope he's not the bad guy. Subvert our expectations. This one, I want my expectations subverted. I think I talked about it, right? He can be a period movie with Mads Mikkelsen and stuff, and Christoph Waltz, and be like, the bad guys who turn out like Suicide Squad, but good. But anyway, so he plays the role of the FBI character in a really, really great way, in the sense that he does come across as a pretty ruthless guy who's not above, bending the law and doing some pretty fucked up things to get Bill to do what he wants. At the same time, though, we get to see him taking orders, or we see the character of J. Edgar Hoover here, played by Martin Sheen, where you can sort of see that shit roll downhill onto Jesse Plemons to push back on the Black Panthers. And there's a wonderful scene between Roy and where he meets J. Edgar Hoover, and you can see that pressure being applied to him directly in a pretty fucked up way by Hoover himself. So that adds an extra layer of complexity to that character, which is, in a lesser film would have just been, the evil, the evil puppet master pulling the strings. But we see here, this is somebody who's he's got some layers. He's got other things going on in his life. It's not just he's doing this because he's evil. But the film is really about the relationship between Fred and Bill. Bill infiltrates the Illinois Black Panthers, and a little bit like I was sort of saying with Gangs of New York, he becomes the head of security for that chapter. And you're like, it's kind of hilarious. Like they appoint a rat to the head of security, and he's being pushed and pulled in each direction, which is a little bit where I was thinking of Leo DiCaprio's character there from Departed, in the sense that he's got the FBI on his back going, no, get us this information, do this to Fred. At the same time as you can see him start to be won over to Fred's perspective and kind of love Fred in a way. And being pulled in the direction of, I want to do these things because I believe in the ideals of what this party wants to do and to achieve, at the same time as my survival and freedom rely on doing the opposite, which is he's being pushed and pulled from both directions. And Bill O'Neill is played by Lakeith Stanfield, and he's fantastic in this. I think he might have been nominated for an acting Oscar as well this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that's where I know him from. Yeah, he was in Knives Out. Yeah.
He was also in Short-Term 12, which is a fucking great movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. He gets around. He's fantastic in this. And again, you really feel for that character. And Daniel Kaluuya, in a way, he's got the flashier role because he plays the charismatic, bombastic leader of a group, where Bill has this role of being sort of put upon by everybody and being, pushed and pulled and being a smaller character in a smaller man. Like, he wasn't a great man by any stretch of imagination. But he still feels he really occupies that role beautifully. And then that trilogy along with Jesse Plemons, there is a lot of other characters who flip it in and out and stuff happens. Obviously, Martin Sheen's quite good as J. Edgar Hoover with a lot of makeup on. You go, it's Martin Sheen with makeup. But
I can't help but feel like when I look at Martin Sheen, if he was playing another president, it's like, okay, this is like the bad universe of the West Wing or something like that. Did it feel like that watching him? Because he's so iconic in the West Wing. He's
not playing anything like a President Bartlett type character.
Like an evil, because
he's not in it enough, and plus he's a real character.
Yeah,
and I know a little bit about the real Hoover, and you sort of think of that and go, Hoover was a cross-dresser. Maybe I should have had a scene with Sheen. Cross-dressing would have been interesting. But also the fact that I know that Martin Sheen will basically do. I think he's a lefty. I think he's a bit of an American lefty. He's a liberal, and of course he famously played a very liberal president on the West Wing. But he'll do anything for money. Like, he's popped up and done some pretty fucked up, he's done like documentaries and stuff, like really stupid documentaries that China is taking over the world and Americans run and hide in the hills. It seemed to go very much against what I think his politics are. And I think it's just they go out and hire him because he's got that a little bit of a presidentially feel to him, because he played the president for
a long time.
For a long time. So you're kind of like, okay. I know, yes, okay. He's an actor. Actors do things for money, but when you're as famous as him, hopefully you've got enough money behind you now and cachet to go, hey, do you want to do a voiceover of my wacky, stupid documentary about nonsense? And you go, you know what? Thanks, mate, but I think I'll pass. Maybe
he's just at the point in his career, so sure, I need something to do because retirement's a terrible idea.
Well, there was nothing else this week, so I said I'd do a wacky, conspiracy theory.
Of course, he did play Uncle Ben in Amazing Spider-Man, so he's died. So there was no kind of coming back from that, unfortunately.
I was going to say, how many people have died in the Marvel universe and still come back? That's not a thing.
Fair point.
So I didn't really connect him to his presidential character. I really did try and see him very much as Hoover. This film is directed by Shaka King, who I'm not overly familiar with outside of this film. I don't think he's done very much. He did some episodes of Shrill, which is a TV show which you can catch here on SBS On Demand. I very much like Shrill, so I would recommend checking that out if you see this and you like this. But it's a really nice little film in the sense it's got a very accessible way. It's kind of a Trojan horse of a film, which I think is what the director liked about it. Is I think he liked the idea of telling a really conventional story, or one we're familiar with, like the idea of, the infiltrator falling in love with a person who's been chosen to infiltrate. We've seen it. I gave a couple of examples. It's been done. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that's an entree. It's a way into this story. And through this story, they're hoping, I think, you'll learn a little bit more about Fred Hampton and what happened to him, what he believed in, and what happened to the Black Panther Party at the time, or the leaders of a party at the time. And Shaka King has, I would suggest, a fairly poor opinion of the police of the day. And I think perhaps he's probably would say has very much changed in the ensuing 50 years, 60 years, probably not. Breaking into black people's houses and shooting them while they're asleep still happens quite regularly. So there's have we learned nothing? I think that might be an angle that the director might be getting you to think about.
Okay. So where does this sit on a scale with something like Black Klansman, for example? Because that is, again, a bit of a Trojan horse of a kind of a message movie, but done very much in a different kind of style, because I loved that one. And obviously it's a very different kind of vibe. This is almost like the anti version of the KKK in some weird twisted way.
In a way, I guess that one's obviously played for laughs. I mean, and it is brilliantly done by Spike Lee because it's a funny movie too.
Yeah.
And, how good was Adam Driver in that film? It's so good, but it's in a way, I guess it could be seen as the same thing in the sense that you're using this. I suggest it's a less broad message than Black Klansman. I mean, in a way, it's interesting. Like I feel like maybe they do suffer from the same thing. Like you saw a film called Judas and the Black Messiah. If you roll up to the cinemas, like if you could roll up to a cinema anywhere but here, of course.
Yeah.
If you could roll up to a multiplex somewhere in a big city in the United States, for example, where they want to sell most of their tickets or something like this, and this was playing, it's not the kind of title that's going to go, sounds
like Fast and the Furious, however.
Fast and the Furious, Black Panthers. I mean,
don't give them ideas. They've already threatened to go to space.
The same as Black Klansman. It sounds political, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the word black. There's the word black in the title, like just make it sound political. But I feel like
very hidden conspiracy as to why Black Widow hasn't actually been released yet.
Or Black Panther. But they, if you sat down someone and you watch both of the films, I think they'd probably find Black Klansman to be a more enjoyable film on the surface, being it is all the way through a comedy, a cop drama comedy.
Palatable. Yeah.
It's probably a more palatable film in a sense where this is telling a more complicated story. If you think of a film again like Gangs of New York, it's not Scorsese's most accessible film.
No.
It's a bit of a tricky story to get behind. I mean, it's not that hard, but it's certainly easier than if we just say you're gonna tell a biopic about some guy you've never heard of who was alive in the 60s. It's an easier way of accessing the story of someone like Fred Hampton. But I don't know that it's as accessible as Black Klansman. But I think I still feel it is not an easy watch. I will pay that. It is a difficult watch. It gets, especially towards the end, when things start to go to shit and things really start to wrap up with or get serious between the Black Panthers and the police. It doesn't pull. This film does not pull any punches. If you are upset by a lot of violence and sort of fairly callous violence, you might find parts of this film upsetting. The person I watched this film with the other night actually had a very visceral physical reaction to some of the violence that happened towards the end of the film, and it wasn't betrayal. So who's our normal visceral physical reactor on the show? That's her job. But it's in a way that way it's going to be more difficult to get through than Black Klansman. But I think in a way, in many ways, it's every bit as important as Black Klansman. Even if people, even in Australia, right? Like, I mean, this is obviously an American story, but you know, we don't treat our Indigenous people any better than they treat African Americans there. So I think it's important for us even here to see these stories as well. And I would strongly recommend it.
Who is the kind of like sympathetic element to here? Because with the way that you've talked about their show, you talked about the more militant style of the Black Panthers, which when you kind of use those descriptors, obviously you generally don't think of them as the kind of good guys. But the way that you've talked about the FBI, particularly Jesse Plemons and all of that, you've not painted them in a good light either. So where is the character of Bill O'Neill the one character to really hang the audience on, and you are on his journey?
I think it's quite skillfully done in the sense of Bill O'Neill's character is reasonably sympathetic, because we can, like I said, we can see him being pushed and pulled in every which way, despite the fact we know he's doing something really unethical, right? Like it's kind of a dick move. At the start of a film, he's a car thief. And you know, he's betraying someone who's he's become his friend. So he's not doing it. He's doing a particularly dishonorable thing, but somehow I still feel like you walk away with some empathy for the situation that Bill found himself in the sense that he didn't actually volunteer to do this. He was basically browbeaten or forced into doing this. He was forced to volunteer to do this. Like it was this or go to jail. And you know, so in that way, he is quite an empathetic character, despite the fact he's betraying a friend. I think the film, and this could be a controversial call depending on which side of the political spectrum you fall, but the Black Panthers, as I said, I may have made them sound like they were not so pleasant, but they are portrayed in a fairly sympathetic light here.
Okay.
Yes, they did carry guns, and they were not above shooting back at the police. But note that I said shoot back. Now, it's not to say that I'm no means am I putting my hand up as I'm some sort of expert on the history of Black Panthers to say that they didn't go out and commit horrible crimes. Maybe they did, but they were, as much as they were a political militant movement, they were also a social movement. So they were famous for things like neighborhood breakfast programs, providing free education and housing and legal help and assisting the community. So in some ways, I mean, it's a really horrible comparison, but something like what Hamas does in the Middle East, and obviously they've got their problems, and I am not endorsing fucking Hamas, but they do the same things, I believe, in places like Lebanon, and the occupied territories, where they actually, I guess they try and recruit people to join their movement by basically looking after the community in a way that the government doesn't or can't or won't. I don't know if the IRA did similar things in their districts as well, but the Black Panther Party were, as much as of a community, they did endeavor at least to be a community movement or a social movement, as much as they were also a political, in some ways, military. Because and you think about it, right? Like you think about the States, right? Like the other side have got guns. You have people who are coming to kick your door down. They got guns and they ain't afraid about using them first and asking questions later. So I've always felt like I could, I could see my way to actually how they came around to that way of thinking. That you can argue it. The police have got guns. The KKK have got weapons. Why should we not have weapons to defend ourselves? We're getting way more political than I intended here, and we're going to get hate mail from somebody. I'm sure of it. But I'm not an expert in the Black Panthers, and I don't know everything about them. But this film, at least, it does not portray them as murderous thugs.
Okay.
So they are not unsympathetic in themselves. And Fred, just because he's so charismatic, is very much a sympathetic character who we come along with on the ride as well.
Okay, cool.
Great film, worth watching for Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield alone.
I've been very interested. Yes, I have. So I decided to get myself into Netflix's purchased movie of The Woman in the Window. This movie was one of the last, I think it was actually the last Fox movie, 20th Century Fox movie, to be branded as 20th Century Fox before the death of that brand because of the merger with Disney. And it got caught up in the COVID pandemic, delay, sell it to streaming service scenario. This is the latest movie by Joe Wright, who is something of a popular director in Hollywood. He has had a variety of successes. He's directed a little bit of Black Mirror for you, Travis. He has also done travesties such as Pan. But he did, a couple of years ago, there was a big Oscar contender for The Darkest Hour that he did. He did one of my favorite movies of the recent years, which was Hannah. He did Atonement, which got a lot of attention, and his breakout movie was Pride and Prejudice. So he has got a lot of kind of cachet in Hollywood. He's got a bit of carte blanche, really, to do kind of whatever he wants at this point, because he's got a lot of that Oscar gold kind of hanging around his neck. So when he does something like The Woman in the Window, which is based on a novel, which I have not read, but the trailer and the way that this movie presents itself, it feels entirely like a bad ripoff of Rear Window.
I was going to say, the synopsis here: an agoraphobic woman living alone in New York begins spying on her new neighbors only to witness a disturbing act of violence. I've seen that movie before.
Yes, you have.
It was called Rear Window.
Yes, and we saw an updated version of that with the one that Shia LaBeouf was in. Yeah, Disturbia. And this movie, like, Joe Wright, personally, I don't feel like he's really showcased himself as a personality behind the camera. He knows how to work with actors, and he knows how to build a very successful movie. He has got this the credentials and the Oscars success to kind of back that up. But this movie is utterly neutered from any sense of directorial artistic presentation style, except for the last 2 minutes where there's just a shot, and it's just Amy Adams, who is the main actor and pretty much on screen all the time, delivers a fantastic performance as well. I will point out she has really proven herself to be an actress who really invests in roles and brings out the best in them. But there's just the scene of her just leaving this apartment block. Spoilers, I guess. And it's just this really cool tracking shot that just goes down vertically. And it just follows her going down the stairs, kind of almost revisiting locations of the scenes that will take place in this apartment building. And it's the one bit that goes, well, where the fuck was all of that character before? That's cool. That hooks me into a little bit more of the Rear Window kind of vibe. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. The rest of it is so bland and neutered, but then it's bizarrely bolstered by some great actor work. This has got a pretty good cast in it. I mean, as I've said already, Amy Adams, Gary Oldman. It's got Anthony Mackie's voice and a brief actual acting moment. A young new talent that was actually quite good in a rather stereotypical role. His name's Fred Hetchinger. He's not been in anything that I've seen before, but he's started getting in a few things. Like there's the Underground Railroad, which is something that I'll be watching on Prime Video soon. Because apparently that's quite a thing. He's in News of the World. But beyond that, he's not really been in anything. And despite being a somewhat cliched, stereotypical role, he's actually quite good. It's got an extended cameo by Julianne Moore. It's got Wyatt Russell, who has now become a name because of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And Brian Tyree Henry, who he was also in something.
Widows, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. Widows and Godzilla vs. Kong. I knew that he was in something I'd seen in cinema recently. And Joker. So he was actually really good, really underplayed, really kind of simply delivered. I really enjoyed his work in this. So there's a lot of really good quality character work and actor work on display here. But the script, the idea, and the direction is so dull when it would have felt even better. It just would have felt more interesting if they had just gone, okay, let's just remake Rear Window. The kind of journey that Amy Adams' character goes on is kind of formulaic, but the kind of twist revelation it feels like it comes really fucking soon, but at the same time, you kind of I kept on stopping the film and looking and seeing how far it had gone, which is never a good sign.
Never a good sign.
It's an hour and 40 minutes, and you feel those hour and 40 minutes, which I'm not against. In this movie, the story that it tries to tell and the way that Amy Adams' character's internal journey is, that time should feel long. It should feel long. It feels appropriate, but it's not entertaining. It's not engaging long.
There are different versions of long, right? There's long, like if you think about the original Rear Window, moments in that where, like the scene where, I'm sorry, spoilers if you haven't seen the fucking 70-year-old film before, bite me. Like the scene where Jimmy Stewart is watching Grace Kelly in the apartment, and Raymond Burr is coming up the stairs, and the tension in that scene is palpable. I mean, that's an hour 52 minutes. But
it's still uses that time well.
Every second of that scene when Grace Kelly's in the room and the killer's coming up the stairs, you're like, it takes an hour, right? Because it's so tense. But it's tense. Yeah. It's long because it's tense, and you're 100% invested in what's going on the screen. And then there's a film like or a show like Jupiter's Legacy or whatever it was that we were talking about last week, where you're like, oh, how is this episode still going?
Yeah. And you get that problem is so painfully apparent in The Woman in the Window, which is a real shame because Amy Adams is a tour de force performance for her. I really think she has been on one hell of a tear in recent years. Really, really, she's always been someone that I've really enjoyed watching, even from her early work in fucking Smallville. But I thought she was fantastic in Arrival. She's even really charming and endearing in Enchanted. American Hustle, she was one of the few things that was actually mildly enjoyable about that fiasco. And I've always thought that she was actually quite a good Lois Lane because she didn't need no man to fucking save her. She was just her own independent woman that was actually good at her job and was shown to be an investigative reporter. How unique for Lois Lane.
I'm less of a fan of Amy Adams because while she does what she does well, she doesn't do anything else.
That's true. She has a type.
She's the Leo DiCaprio of actresses. In the sense that Leo very rarely at least strays outside the straight and narrow of what Leo does well, which is fine. He makes a shit ton of money doing it. And Amy, people enjoy. She's won awards. I don't know. I'd never found her. I look at a film and go, "Oh, good, Amy Adams is in it." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I think I know exactly what you're going to do."
No, that's a perfect simile. I think I feel the same way about Leo. It's in that realm. So you know what you're going to get from her. And Gary Oldman is, I don't know if he's, it's fucking Gary Oldman. Right. Anthony Mackie doesn't really get an opportunity to do much here because he is largely a voice on a phone, except for one scene, which they could have done a lot more with, but they were trying to underplay it, but I think they undercut it too much and ended up being just like, okay, yep, moving on. All right, this is the revelation. I kind of saw this coming from the beginning anyway. And I don't think this is my superpower coming in here. I feel like it's largely wearing its tricks on its sleeve. And even Julianne Moore, who is a categorically top quality actress that has got a good sense of range. She's playing a very stereotypical character here, and it's like, okay, you're doing a good job with what you've got, but at the same time, I'm not invested. I don't care. I know what's going to happen to you. I know who you are. Let's just skip to the end. And it's really, it's the worst problem of this movie, and it's all because of Joe Wright. It feels like there's no fucking passion or energy or interest from him to actually try to deliver something that is either visually enticing, because it's a very bleak, boring. There's moments where it's kind of cool. Like I said, this end shot where it just kind of visually comes down and it just follows her, and it's almost like watching a theater performance and a stage and a true set. And it's just a cool way of looking at it. There's a moment where she's remembering something, and then she just looks into a room and she sees kind of fragments of this memory in the room, and it's like, there's moments of good. Why aren't you putting that effort in throughout the whole fucking thing, please? Why have you just gone, I'm going to put 10% into this and it's just going to get me what I want? It's so frustrating, because even Wyatt Russell, who I think we were both very lukewarm on in Winter Soldier, he has got a bit more to play with here, and there's a little bit more of the genetic Kurt Russell DNA charm on display here, but it's so very quickly kicked to the curb to allow for a stereotype that you've seen 100,000 times. It's like, oh God, come on. Okay, so this is the Amy Adams show, and no one else is putting any fucking effort in here. Gary Oldman comes in for kind of cameo scenes throughout, and it's like, okay, he's playing a stereotype here. This is taking a long time to watch.
I feel like this just reinforces my opinion that I think maybe it's ours, but Netflix has become the direct-to-video of the 21st century.
Well, I mean, I would say yes, but this was one that they bought that was a 20th Century Fox, and yes, Fox had a lot of problems going into the last death throes of the company's life before being consumed by the megalomaniacal conglomerate that is Disney. But they were one of the last real bastions, I feel, of the blockbuster cinema scape that was actually trying to do something that was slightly different. Like their tentpole movies were like Planet of the Apes, which was actually quite good and not just pure schlock or pure explosions. They were trying to tell something a little bit more intelligent. And with Fox and Fox Searchlight and all of that gone, it makes me very sad. And this should have been, I wish that it had been the last hurrah of Fox, but it's just not. It's such a death rattle of a movie. It's really sad. It's sitting on a 40% Metascore, and that's generous, honestly. That is entirely based on the character performance and character effort more than anything else. It's a
disappointing.
Real yeah.
I guess I'll be giving it a wide berth.
Yeah, it's one that you wouldn't even want to put it on in the background, because you'll kind of feel like, all right, that something happened, but I don't really know. I don't care. Let's just change over to Samurai Jack instead. That's more fun.
Let's watch some Rick and Morty reruns.
Yeah, pretty much. It's such a shame, because there's talent here in every facet of it. But the source material is obviously not unique, and they've not tried to do anything unique or original with it beyond that either. So it's like a dilution of a dilution, and it's just sad.
Yeah. There you go. Not great.
Well, not great at all, I'm afraid. Now, Travis,
I'm gonna tie a bow around a slightly shorter show.
Yeah, I've already put a name on it. It's called Get the Boots In.
Getting the boots in on this one. So I had a look at a new documentary series again on Netflix. The Sons of Sam, A Descent into Darkness. This is a documentary series. The Son of Sam case grew into a lifelong obsession for journalist Maury Terry, who became convinced that the murders were linked to a satanic cult.
Okay.
A satanic cult.
I don't really remember that particular element of Son of Sam.
You mean your Summer of Sam, the Spike
Summer
Lee
of
film?
Sam, yeah.
If you want to learn about the Son of Sam, watch The Summer of Sam by Spike Lee, starring Adrian Brody. It's fucking great. It's a great movie. Do not watch this. This is a giant pile of shit. Like, this is a 7 on IMDb. A fucking 7. Who the hell are rating this shit? Honestly, it's fucking terrible. Okay, so I watched all of the first episode, or it's a 4-part series. I watched probably half of the second episode before I said, no, sorry, I'm done. Episode 1 is passable. And that is mainly because it is very documentary based in the sense, like, looking this up, it says it stars Paul Giamatti, and I'm like, I don't remember seeing Paul Giamatti in this. I mean, he must have popped up later on in the series when they had some reconstructions or something, because the first episode is very much documentary style, introducing Maury Terry, who is, I guess, kind of the inspiration behind the series, being a journalist. But it really does sort of step through the timeline and the history of the Son of Sam killings, about how they happened, what the effect was on the populace, how they caught him, etc. And some of that was mildly interesting, which I hadn't come across before. I'm a bit of a true crime person, so I like some. I've seen some stuff, but I learned some stuff from the first episode. But I could already tell they were setting it up for this Maury Terry guy to be a character in the story. So, do you remember a while ago there was that series about the Golden State Killer? Patton Oswalt's wife.
Yeah.
And she inserted herself. Her story was, a chunk of the show. And about her having cancer, which is obviously horrible, and her passing away, which is obviously horrible, but it didn't fit that story. But I felt like this one, I'm like, oh, he's going to be Patton Oswalt's wife in this story, right? Like, he's obviously dead because of the way they're talking about him.
Yeah.
And they're basically going to use him as a narrative element to drive the story forward with his research. And this episode 2 is started to get absolutely ridiculous, full of sensationalist nonsense, completely baseless assumptions and, accusations and insinuations. And that, like, oh, well, this person who lived next door and down the road from Son of Sam, from David Berkowitz, the convicted killer, who was the Son of Sam. This guy down the road who looks a lot like a sketch of somebody drew of after one of the Son of Sam killings, and and if you do, and it's like this. I can't remember exactly what it was because I was getting angry. It was like if you rearrange the letters in this Son of Sam letter, and then you run it under a filter, and then you multiply it by the number of spanners in the Sidchrome tool set, it kind of adds up to 666. It's like obviously devil worship, and it's just drawing this incredibly long bow of like, well, if you look at it this way and you turn it upside down and flip it around a couple of times, and you squint a bit, you can kind of looks a little bit like a pentagram, and they start to. And they're trying to sell it to us like this is it was Satan worshippers who did this, and it was a satanic cult, and like they're trying to link. It sounded like I didn't watch it all, so you can tell me I'm wrong if you just dropped it. They were trying to make a link between the Son of Sam and the Manson killings.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm like, they were talking about them like there was some sort of connection between Manson and Berkowitz and the whatever group they think the Son of Sam killings were done by. And I'm like, this is fucking nonsense.
Yeah.
Nonsense. Now, I guess, it reminds me of, about that Simpsons episode, and by the truth, we mean lies. But they're entertaining lies. And in the end, isn't that the real truth? The answer is no. That's what this show is. They're entertaining lies, and like
but aren't actually entertaining.
Well, I mean, they might be entertaining. Maybe that's why it's got a 7, right? If you could shut your brain off and go, you maybe Charles Manson and David Berkowitz were in cahoots. If you're a fucking idiot who doesn't know anything about Manson or Berkowitz or, how criminal these guys work.
Enemies.
But,
they never forgave the other one when they cheated at Uno.
Like He-Man and Skeletor.
There's plenty of amazing gay fanfic about He-Man and Skeletor.
I've seen the Dolph Lundgren film. But I guess if you're able to, I guess it's maybe one of my weaknesses. It's like the Dell effect we talk about, where if something doesn't make scientific sense to my friend Dell, he's out. But it's a little bit like this for me here, where a show like this starts to not make sense and starts to throw, like baseless accusations at the screen, and hoping some of it sticks. And it's like, because it's you say cool sounding things like Satanism. Big scary, if you get satanic cult, you're like, anyway, this is juicy. I'm going to keep watching and enjoy this. But I'm like, well, it doesn't make very much sense at all. Like, that's a huge assumption in logic you've just made. It's a giant leap to think of it that way. It could mean, and all of a sudden, because the show's not making sense to me anymore, its assumptions don't make sense to me anymore. I'm kind of out. Like, I'm kind of like, you've lost me now. Like, I mean, you might, if you've got an interesting theory about a killer, that's one thing, but you've got to have something to back it up other than the fact that, it's a cool story if you add Satanism to it. And because it just completely made no sense, its accusations were completely ridiculous and quite obviously had zero merit, which is probably why they've never been pursued before. I'm sorry, I'm not finding this entertaining anymore. I'm finding it infuriatingly stupid and, in a way, fucking disrespectful to the people this guy killed.
Do you think that if this was taken as pure fantasy and didn't try to show itself as a documentary, it would work better?
Maybe, but you'd need to couch it in a very different format. So maybe that's what this is trying to do. I don't know. But by selling it to me like it's a documentary in episode 1 and then pivoting and trying to tell a fantasy story in episode 2, that's not going to work. But if you wanted to set it in a universe where, let's think of something like the Nevers, for example. But we have it set in the 70s, and satanic serial killers are a thing, or the serial killers that were going around, because there were a lot of them in the 70s and 80s. They're all demons or something like that. So a little bit of something like Grimm or one of those other fantasy shows with fairies and shit in them.
Fairies and shit.
There's a whole bunch of. Was that one with Orlando Bloom in it? Penny Dreadful or something? I don't know.
No, that Penny Dreadful is fucking awesome, and I will not have a bad word said against it.
What was the Orlando Bloom one?
That one was that was something Lane. This is so memorable.
It was so memorable, but it was like set in a universe where like fantasy characters are like a real thing, right?
Yeah. Well,
Carnival Lane, Carnival Row.
Carnival Lane, yeah, Carnival Row. Carnival Row. Yeah.
So if you set it in a universe like that, where like serial killers were like demons, or maybe it would in a series like Constantine, for example, like that kind of would have made sense a little bit. That was more played for laughs, so I don't know you would have quite got away with that. But like, if we had a more serious Constantine, a little bit more like the Keanu Reeves film, where serial killers have been sent by Satan to do stuff, and our hero, the Maury Terry guy, the journalist who apparently inspired it, is the one person who can see them, and he's almost the John Constantine character who has to work with the John Constantine character. Maybe that would have worked, but we are buddy cop movie, but they're facing demons. Like, didn't they do that with Bright? But maybe that would work. But that would be a completely different.
In the end, it's a completely different product. Yeah,
it's a different product, completely different product. Other than the fact you're using a real life setting to do it, and I don't think you could if it was fiction, because again, telling a fictional story around a guy who killed real people, that could be considered distasteful.
Yeah, I don't know how I would kind of feel about that. Like if.
I mean, there were people out there who got stuck into Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for his portrayal of the Manson family and stuff, and then having Charles Manson meet with Sharon Tate, and they're like, "Oh, that's not okay." And you're like, "That's a fair enough perspective, I think, to take on it."
They did meet.
No, they did not.
Oh, they did not.
Manson didn't actually kill Sharon Tate; his followers did. So it's not actually known whether Charles Manson met Sharon Tate or not.
Deniability.
So that scene was kind of invented, but I didn't have a problem with it, but some did, and I can see why they might have.
But even then, in something like that, it's extrapolated fantasy, where it's like kind of twisting out some of the threads that have already been established. As that's plausible. That's understandable. We're just kind of going, you know who the real reason that Trump didn't win is because of the lizard people.
Yeah. This is kind of in that category a little bit. Like it just makes absolutely no sense. There's no basis to any of its accusations. It's completely ridiculous. And you're right. It's an interesting observation, actually. If you're setting your film up as a documentary, my expectations change. My suspension of disbelief isn't there anymore. I have no suspension of disbelief because you're telling me this is real. This is a real story of a real thing that happened. If I'm watching, Lord of the Rings, I will obviously.
This is based on real events.
Have you been to New Zealand? No one's actually been to New Zealand. We don't know what goes on there. There could be hobbits. We don't know. Frankly, we don't care.
Hey, Flat Earth has still confirmed that New Zealand is just an island just off of the UK.
It's New Zealand. I mean, I don't have any interest about what goes on there. They play rugby, and that's enough.
It's boiled down an entire country.
New Zealand. We play rugby.
They play rugby.
They play rugby. And they claim to have invented the Lamington, but they are wrong. Wait for my new series of novels, The Lamington Wars. Coming your way.
It's going to be on Netflix as a TV series.
I've been picked up for an eight season deal. It's going to be good. Adam Sandler's down to produce. It's
with Melissa McCartney co-starring.
And we just wait till season 2. We get the Pavlova Wars. It's going to get this time. It's personal.
I'm thinking The Crown meets like the Great British Bake Off.
Yeah, and then like the third season will be like if the third season where everyone's completely lost interest and doesn't care anymore will be a war over Russell Crowe. You'll be like, nah. You can have him. No, you can have him. Really? No, it's fine. It's fine. It's yours. I don't have. You can take him. We're not even making him a citizen.
In the time machine to what started this deadly feud. He threw a telephone.
So, actually, no. I got. It should be. This one should be like Sam Neill versus Russell Crowe, because they're the two people who are like Kiwi actors who always get told they're Australian. And the soundtrack's going to be like Crowded House. See how interested we are in the Sons of Sam. We're just completely spitballing new series.
Far more interesting idea.
Look, if you I've seen some people say how much they enjoyed it. Look, if you don't have a problem with like wild, crazy theories, that's fine. You might enjoy it. I also happen to know a little bit about the concept of Satanism in the sense that, like, I've read some books. I've known some people who are kind of practicing. It is an actual religion, believe it or not. It is a practice religion by people. And
they
it's
do a lot of good in America.
They put up those goat statues in like state capitals because they can. Because they're like, oh no, if you're going to have a statue of the 10 Commandments, we get to have a Satan statue, and they've got to do it. Which I think is very, very funny. I think it's very, very funny. But they aren't what they are portrayed to be in the American media, or lesser so the Australian media, where they go around sacrificing people. That's not.
It's not nearly as sexy of an idea, though.
It isn't. If you have a real thing, it's like they just happen to have this philosophy where, you can do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody, and everybody consents to what's going on, then you're cool. I'm very much
back to The Simpsons again. It's sort of like, he mows your lawns. This is Rowdy Roddy Piper. It's sensationalism. And that's what
exactly
they sell.
it is exactly that kind of thing. And it's like you say the word Satanism in like no, Satanists.
Do you play Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, but like if you play your records backwards, do people still do that with MP3s? And
I know that people play podcasts at double speed.
They play this one at triple speed if they could.
That's called the skip button, Travis.
Or Joe Rogan podcast, in other words.
Shade being thrown.
I'm starting a war with him.
Aim for the top. Come on.
If only he spends 10% of his followers our way, that'd be fine. Come here, insult us. We're happy with that.
1%.
But this is challenging for me. It's crap, and it's the worst kind of crap. It's deeply disrespectful to the people who lost their lives, and it's disrespectful to you couldn't make a documentary about this and go, they're a Christian cult who are going around crucifying fucking people. Like, I mean, that would be offensive to. They would be very offended if you said that about Christians or Scientologists or something. And this other group of people, just because there aren't many of them and they're historically downtrodden, it's okay to say that they go around murdering people. It's just crap. Forget about
it. I mean, it's when you link something to Satan, like arguably the archetype for evil villains, it's like, yep, there you go. It's like you think, okay, we've got a movie, we need a bad guy. Okay, there's no way that we could get the Nazis involved. Russians are very passe. Could we possibly get like Chechens? Nah. Satanism, Satan worshippers. Those are your kind of four big bad guys. Or non-specific Asian-orientated person.
North Koreans are pretty good for that because they don't go to the movies much.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. And it's lazy. It's boring.
I think I've given this shit more time than it deserves. It's really.
Hey, you've been getting the boots in.
I did a very good job of sticking to this. Should be a regular segment. If this was a regular segment, it would just be pretty much everything I review.
Curmudgeon. Determined to just shed the musical man.
That's a no. Anyway, so I think that ties a bow around this weekend. I think we're under 2 hours for a change.
Yeah, for a change. I have watched all of Love, Sex, and Robots Volume 2, but Travis has only watched the first two, so we are holding off so that we can have a more shared conversation about that next week. We are going to be talking about The Spanish Prisoner, which I'm very interested in. I have got some thoughts on another Netflix movie called Love and Monsters. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of other things. I'm sure Travis will have something.
We'll have some conversation around the other Netflix film, Oxygen.
Oh, yes.
The French film starring Melanie Laurent. And I think...
Classy motherfucker.
Because Army of the Dead opens on Friday in Australia on Netflix.
Yes.
So I think I can expect it. I'm very curious to see what that looks like.
Yes. And just the final thing, I did spot that Denis Villeneuve's Dune is going to be in theaters and not on streaming services. So I'm looking forward to when that releases, sometime just after my birthday, I believe.
So is it going to be mid-year?
I think it's like the end of June or beginning of July.
So the North American summer then.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that. I was hoping to be able to catch that on the big screen because I think that's going to be a visual treat. It is a fantastic book. And there's a hell of a lot of talent.
I suspect Denny. We saw Blade Runner 2049, right? Like Denny is a filmmaker who paints to the edges, right? You're not doing yourself justice by watching one of his films on the small screen. If you have an alternative.
Absolutely right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining in on episode 113 of Armchair Producers. We talked about our chain movie of the week, LA Story. Travis picked The Spanish Prisoner for next week's. We talked about Judas and the Black Messiah. We had some sponsors from the early 80s. I talked about The Woman in the Window, and Travis got the boots in on the Son of Sam. Thank you so much for joining us. Please remember that you can come and join us live on twitch.tv/thefriedbrain, youtube.com/armchairproducers, facebook.com/George Terran. You can follow us. You can join in. If you have any recommendations for movies and things like that, please let us know. We will happily take those on. You can give us your Twitch Prime subscription, which is free if you have a Twitch Prime account, an Amazon Prime account. You can donate to us if you really feel like paying us to shut up. Why not? Other than that, thank you so much. Thank you to the talent, Mr. Travis Croft.
You're lucky to have had me.
Yes, well, I know that it is a tight schedule, and I do appreciate it. And I'm racking up one hell of a bill with your services.
It's in the mail.
Yep. That's why I'm in a moving house. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, good night.